The Russian government has recently announced a drastic measure to ban former President Barack Obama and 499 other Americans from entering its territory. This is a retaliation against the latest round of sanctions imposed by Washington on Moscow over its invasion of Ukraine and its human rights violations. But how did this conflict escalate to such a point? What are the reasons behind the US sanctions and the Russian ban? In this video, we will explain the background and context of this diplomatic crisis that has strained the relations between the two superpowers. The US and Russia have been at odds for decades, but their rivalry intensified after the collapse of the Soviet Union and the US emerged as the sole superpower in the world, while Russia struggled to rebuild its economy and political system. The US expanded its influence and alliances in Eastern Europe and Central Asia, while Russia felt threatened and marginalized by the encroachment of NATO and the EU. The tensions reached a new peak in 2014, when Russia annexed Crimea, a peninsula in southern Ukraine that had a large ethnic Russian population. The US and its allies condemned this move as a violation of international law and sovereignty, and imposed economic sanctions on Russia and its officials. Russia denied any wrongdoing and claimed it was protecting its interests and people in the region. The sanctions were tightened in 2016, after the US accused Russia of interfering in its presidential election to help Donald Trump defeat Hillary Clinton. The US expelled 35 Russian diplomats and closed 2 Russian compounds in Maryland and New York. Russia responded by expelling 35 American diplomats and seizing 2 US properties in Moscow. The relations deteriorated further in 2018, when the US imposed more sanctions on Russia for its alleged involvement in the poisoning of a former Russian spy, Sergei Skripal, and his daughter, Yulia, in Britain. The US also accused Russia of violating a nuclear arms treaty and supporting the Syrian regime in its brutal crackdown on civilians. Russia denied all these allegations and imposed counter-sanctions on the US. The situation worsened in 2020, when a massive cyber attack targeted several US government agencies and private companies. The US blamed Russia for orchestrating the hack, which compromised sensitive data and national security. The US also criticized Russia for its crackdown on opposition leader Alexei Navalny, who was poisoned, arrested, and sentenced to prison for his anti-corruption campaign. Russia dismissed these accusations as baseless and politically motivated. In 2021, President Joe Biden took office and vowed to take a tougher stance on Russia than his predecessor. He called Putin a killer and said he would pay a price for his actions. He also imposed new sanctions on Russia for its cyber attack, election interference, human rights abuses, and military aggression. He expelled 10 Russian diplomats and banned US banks from buying Russian government bonds. In 2022, the US announced more punitive measures against over 300 targets to punish Russia for its invasion of Ukraine. The US accused Russia of violating Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity by sending thousands of troops and weapons to its border. The US also expressed concern over Russia's deployment of hypersonic missiles and nuclear submarines that could pose a threat to Europe and America. In 2023, Russia retaliated by banning former President Barack Obama and 499 other Americans from entering the country. The list included politicians, journalists, activists, businessmen, and celebrities who were deemed hostile or unfriendly to Russia.